Welcome to Eviliv3, the live media commentary of the show that answers a question. Between this book and the film Mannequin, can we ever trust them again? Subscribe if you're new to the channel because today we are reviewing Night of the Mannequins by Stephen Graham Jones. All right, my initial thoughts, I had a really good friend ask me if I was interested in going to an author signing with him. The author was Stephen Graham Jones. And so I'd already read 2 of his novels thanks to my friend's recommendation and thought, well, this would be a great experience. And so we went. What followed was some interesting back and forth with the author. I really enjoyed him. The people conducting the interview just sucked at their jobs. Everything they said was, oh, I love that. I love that. There's no actual interviewing going on. They just said they loved everything that he said and then asked them the next question. There was literally no back and forth at all. You had to wear masks today in a big ass, I think it was like a Baptist church or something like that. I mean, there's just no reason for the way it was set up for it to go down the way it did. So the experience wasn't great. However, I love the author. I think the author is amazing. And he brought up something that I thought was really poignant and interesting in that he could always tell when someone who was not a Native American wrote a Native American story, because they always tend to treat the subject matter of Native Americans or their ideas or history as like sacred, and you have to like tiptoe and honor it and everything. Whereas Native Americans actually have a little tongue in cheek and joke around and laugh about their own culture and history and everything. And I always thought that was a fascinating discussion that I'd never considered before, but reflecting back on everything I've seen and read, yeah, that holds up 100%. And it completely changes the way I internalize and receive Native American stories now, simply because of that one comment. It was brilliant. And so going into this, while this is not overtly a Native American story in that it never once talks about a reservation, it never once references anyone being Native American or from a specific tribe or anything like that. It's just a story. It didn't really connect with me on that level, but damn, is this a good story. This is, and especially like I'm a big horror fan. And so this whole story's premise is based around the idea of a slasher. And I love me a good slasher, and especially the psychology of the slasher. Whereas, you know, you sort of start with films like Black Sunday, where it sort of leaps off into the whole slasher genre. The killer is usually someone that's just fucked up in the head. Like they're just insane or psychotic or sociopaths or just something that they are, you know, abnormal to the rest of society, which causes them to then engage in this activity. And this follows through with this novel perfectly. So it folds into that traditional slasher trope, but then it sort of frames it from the slasher's perspective in a very interesting way. So I'm going to get into some spoilers here, and I would highly recommend that you read this novel before you get spoiled by it. So because of that, leave if you haven't read this book. Do yourself, it's only like just over 100 pages. It's a really quick read. So do yourself a favor, pick up the Kindle or the physical book, read it, then come back and watch the review. Here we go, spoiler territory. All right, so again, Night of the Mannequins, written by Stephen Graham Jones. It's a novelette. It's not even really a novella. So let's be fair. 100 pages is just slightly over a short story. So it's not quite a novelette or a novella, even that, you know. So it's very much in the novelette territory, the baby phase of a novel. It was, of course, written by Stephen Graham Jones, and it was published by Tor Nightfire, recently just republished, but I believe originally it was published in September 1st or on September 1st, 2020. Here's the crazy thing about this. I knew the date that it was published. Of course, I was alive in 2020, so I know what was going on in the world. But as I was reading this, my brain kept going back to the 1990s. Like Everything about this book feels like 1990 to me until the third act, the final, inciting incident moment where it references other people holding up their phones to post to social media video of what's going on. And then suddenly I was like pulled out like, oh, of course, this is set in the modern era. This is not set in 1990s. But for whatever reason, the descriptions, the way the characters talk to each other, the style of writing, whatever it was, my brain was firmly entrenched in the 90s, which actually made me like it more because it reminded me of me and my, as fucked up as that sounds, it reminded me of me and my friends when I was in the 90s and the misadventures that we would have and the things that we would do. It connected me with this story in a way that I wasn't anticipating. Okay, that is all to say, neither me nor my friends are murderers. So those are my initial thoughts. This novel was actually awarded the 2020 Bram Stoker Award for Best Long Fiction and the 2021 Shirley Jackson Award for Best Novella. Great. Totally see it. This is a great story that everyone should read. All right, so the setup is it's a group of friends, and it's all being told through the lens of one friend. They refer to him once as Saw and then once as Sawyer Grimes. Other than that, you have no idea who the narrator is, and that's only at the very end that they give his name. And then at the beginning of the third act is when you get, no, I'm sorry, I think it's about halfway through you get Saw. All of that is to say, this is an unreliable narrator that we're getting this from, for obvious reasons once you start reading the book, but also I think it's intentionally unreliable because this individual has clearly had a break with reality. And I like that aspect of it because it makes it more immersive and it makes it more believable. Okay, all that being said, this is about a bunch of friends from Saw's perspective, and it starts by saying they all died except for him. And then when we get to the end of it, we clearly have him dying as well. And so this must be right before that final moment in his life. And we'll get there. So strap in. It starts in this, what I perceived as a very small town, economically challenged town. Some of the parents haven't been working. Everyone, they have a friend, Shanna, who is working as a maitre d' or a clerk with the theater, the local theater house. And so she would sneak her friends in, and that pissed off the assistant and manager, of course. And so they would go around checking tickets and stuff just to make sure no one was sneaking in and stuff. This was an act that, when I was a kid, happened all the time. But I haven't heard of anyone sneaking into a theater in 40 years, 30 years maybe. It's been so long that I don't know if this is a real thing anymore or not, which is, again, why I believed it was in the 90s, because I just can't imagine it happening nowadays, especially with assigned seating and shit like that. But in any case, they wanted to play a prank on her, and so Saw, his parents, or actually it alludes to the fact that him and his friends found a mannequin in a creek, brought it to his house, and they ended up taking the mannequin, dressing it up, and putting it in the theater as a prank to their friend. Now, the prank side of it must just be that there is someone that broke in and ended up being a fake person. So, haha, hilarious prank. But what happened is once everyone left, as the theater was emptying because the movie was over, and again, it was like a superhero team-up movie, so at the time, it must have been X-Men, which also feeds into my idea that it was, further back than it actually was. In any case, Saw, the main character, the narrator, tells you that he saw the mannequin stand up and walk out of the theater. And this is the very beginning, because he'd already mentioned that he was on medication before this and that he's off to go to college. Initially, he's doing AP classes, so his friends call him Genius or Einstein or something like that. And so he's clearly under a lot of stress. He's under medication, And everything in his life is changing because they were best friends all of them were best friends when they were in high school. And now they've all gone out of high school. They're sort of splitting up. And this is the normal time when kids start to grow up and split apart from their friends and all start to live their own separate lives. It can be a very, very difficult time in people's lives. And so I think all of those factors together forced this sort of mental break on him to see this mannequin get up and move and leave. And then a random accident happened with Shanna's home. A semi curved off of the road and went right through her house. And everyone believed that she was dead. They found these meaty corpses. The meaty corpses ended up being, at the very end, it explains this, but ended up being their animals, like their dogs. But it was so devastated, no one could really tell. And let's be honest, the narrator didn't really care to find out for sure because this was an excuse. This was justification to start what his fractured mind convinced him needed to happen. So the only reason in his perspective that Shanna died was because the mannequin killed her. And the mannequin itself was not just a normal mannequin, but it started to grow and supernaturally become physically larger and larger into the size of a kaiju, which is the only reason why the diesel semi would have deviated from its course to avoid it and smashed and killed her whole family. And so in his mind, and it only grew because it was kept in a garage area where his mother kept Miracle Grow. And in his twisted, fucked up mind, that's why the mannequin grew. And the mannequin then wanted to kill everyone that put him in the position of being in a prank, which is Saw and his friends Shanna, Daniel, Tim, and JR. All of them were going to die now. And so Saw himself, well, look, I can either sit back and do nothing and let this mannequin kill every one of my friends and their families, like he did with Shanna, with the semi going through her home and killing people, or I could just go and kill my friends myself and save their family. Now, you start to see here the obvious mental break that this character has. And so the whole story is about him becoming the mannequin and killing all of his friends in some really kind of mundane, interesting, and exotic ways. There's a point where at the very, very final act of the film where he's figuring out how to kill his friend JR, and he was talking about getting a coat hanger and jabbing it up his nose and raking his hand around, and it just made me cringe and just physically react like, oh God, brutal. But that's exactly what I want when I'm reading. Like, this is why I love Bret Easton Ellis. And again, I have to say this story reminds me a lot of Bret Easton Ellis and his latest novel, Shards. So I don't know if one was influenced by the other. I think Shards came out more recently, so maybe it was the other way around, or just concurrent ideas happening, which is possible. But both stories, well, first of all, Shards is amazing, and Bret Easton Ellis is an amazing author if you haven't read him. But Shards infinitely reminded me of my childhood in so many ways, so much so that it made me want to write my own autofiction from the fucked up shit that I experienced as a kid with all of my occult, experiences and crazy friends dying and just all sorts of weird stuff. And so that's what this reminds me of, is autofiction, an unreliable narrator, a sort of a metafiction novelette. And so the two of them hand in hand are just really, really great. Okay, that being said, Saw is going around killing his friends, and then he is just sort of physically transforming into the mannequin in that he's putting on a mask to cover the truth of his face and become this sort of blank stared being that's killing on behalf of the mannequin in order to prevent other people from dying because of the mannequin. And he's just slowly losing himself throughout the entire novelette. And then finally, at the final act at a drive-in theater, he is confronted with the reality that Shanna never died in that accident at the very beginning, which was the jumping off point of all of this story of him going around killing. She couldn't go back home because her home was destroyed by the semi. And so she's been staying at this church home or shelter or something like that So that's why he never saw her. That's why there was never a body found, because it was the animals' bodies, even though her family was actually killed in it, supposedly. And she came up, she's like, I knew it was you. And he faced with the reality of like, no, I did it to save their families. I thought you died. This is great that you're alive. And so they have this fight back and forth. He ends up escaping. He drives down to the lake, which is the only logical place that this kaiju mannequin could live without being seen, is underwater. And so he goes there and he ends up presumably killing himself by drowning himself in the water so that he can be with the mannequin when the next group of kids in the future inevitably find them both and bring them out for their own pranks. It is a great twist of a slasher story. The fact that his mental break happened because of a prank is inventive and interesting. The way that he is constantly convincing himself and you, the reader, about his justifications and the need to kill his friends and how it happens and everything is just so fucking awesome. And then ultimately, the description that he gives to the world throughout the course of this narration is immersive. Again, I think like 5 years of my childhood, I grew up in a very small town called Salem, Utah. Very, very tiny. And it was just like this. We had little dirt bikes. I mean, his was a 750, so it wasn't a dirt bike, or maybe it was a dirt bike, but it was much more powerful. We had little 80s. And we'd go in like back fields, even as little kids, and just ride around in back fields on motorcycles. And so I instantly connected with the idea of friends getting together, having misadventures without tons of parental supervision, because that's how we were raised. That's how everyone was raised in my generation. And you could get away with a lot. And that's how you had like kids killing kids, which doesn't really happen in the news very often nowadays. But when I was a kid, it was all over the news. And most of it was satanic panic and stuff like that. Sacrificial killings and stuff like that. And whether or not it actually happened, which it didn't, but it was always in the vernacular of conversation, that idea of child killing child. And so this whole premise spawned a series of a bunch of different types of films around that same idea. And then an entire culture came up out of it through the satanic panic because of it. And so it was so directly influential to me reading it. I'm sorry, not influential, but immersive reading it, that I just felt like I've lived this story before. It was so good. Hey, Chris, thanks for tuning in. You weren't aware of the novel. You appreciate bringing good stories like this to the audience. I got to thank Cameron. I would never have known about this author if it wasn't for him. And I would never have gotten this book if it wasn't, oh man, I haven't even shown the book. And I wouldn't have gotten the book if it wasn't for him inviting me to come with him to the author signing. So I'm just so indebted to that wonderful human being, because Cameron is just such a good person. And the things that he likes are just things that I instantly connect with as well. It's just great. Let's see. This isn't a prequel to Mannequin movie. I wish. I grew up on that Mannequin movie. And I loved it. I really loved it. It was so good. Quintessential 80s film, Mannequin. Do you think this would translate to a movie? Yes, I think it would translate very well to a movie. I think it would probably do better, especially after seeing that new miniseries, Something Terrible is About to Happen, or something to that effect is the name. After seeing that, this would make an amazing miniseries. 3 to 6 episodes, maybe 45-ish minutes long. It could be very good. And I think it would just be stunning. And it would open up a lot of other people to this author, whom I've talked to a lot of people about this author, and none of them knew about him, which blows my mind, because he is an award-winning author. He has done some New York Times bestselling work, and yet no one I know knows about him, and I only know about him because of a friend. So it's crazy. So yeah, I think it would work great as a miniseries for sure. Not so much as a film, because I feel like we need to stay with the character. The way this is written, you really get inside of the experience of the character, and you need time to do that. And you can't get that in an hour and a half, 2 hour film. You just can't. So my favorite part of this has to be the slow descent and realization while it happens in the first act. The slow descent of realizing that this isn't just a group of friends splitting apart naturally through age and experience, but this is an individual that's splitting with reality, that he is literally losing his mind and his sense of self. And to see him then transform into a mannequin is just fascinating. So that's, I think, my favorite part. And the kills are fun and nice. They're not particularly creative. Most of it is just strangulation, but it's still raw and brutal, in not only because it's his very close friends that he's killing, but also because, like, he's getting away with it. Like, he gets away with killing 1, 2, 3, 4 people before the very final act, where he ends up killing Shanna almost by accident. So it's very, very good. Anyway, my least favorite part is the length. You write something like this, and I want to live in that world a little longer. At least give me 200 pages. If you can't give me 200 pages, okay, then I don't know. I'll just have to suffer like I am right now, because it was so good that I just want it to be longer. I don't want to leave. Like, I literally started it this morning, and before lunch I finished it, and I was just like, fuck. What am I going to do the rest of the day? Like, this was my day plan, is to sink into this short story. Anyway, I couldn't do anything else than give it 5 out of 5 evil eyes. This is a fantastic short story that I highly recommend anyone who likes horror or slasher genre to read. And if you've never read Stephen Graham Jones before, this is a very easy entry point to his writing. Not only is it super short, so it's not going to take up a ton of your time, you'll learn whether you like his writing or not just from this story. But also just because it's a fucking great story. Do yourself a favor and read a good short story. You always got to stop with 4 murders. Everyone knows that. They are the rules. I mean, what can you do? All right, so that is my review of Night of the Mannequins. If you have read it, what do you think? And if you haven't read this one yet, have you read any other Stephen Graham Jones? What do you think of his writing? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you to creator patrons Aaron Hardy and D. Robert Handy, developer patrons Chris Androu and Sam Ruiz, and all of the YouTube members. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. And as always, like it or not, evil spelled backwards is live. So get out there, avoid mannequins at all costs, and be evil.